This has been the toughest time of our lives. No one should have to go through what we've been through as a family. We are satisfied that justice has been done, but unfortunately, no amount of justice will bring Lee back.
Good evening. He was the little boy who always wanted to be a soldier, murdered where he should have been totally safe, near his barracks in London. 2 men were found guilty of his murder today, still insisting they did it in the name of Islam.
Tonight, the family of Fusilier Lee Rigby, who was from Middleton, tell us about the ordeal of the murder trial and about having to face their first Christmas without him. And some of his closest friends will tell us about the terrible gap in their lives.
But we're starting live at the Old Bailey, where we join our correspondent Elaine Wilcox, who's been following the case for us from the outset. Elaine.
Well, Lucy, the jury took just 90 minutes to find Michael Adebolajo and Michael Adebowale guilty of murdering Fusilier Lee Rigby. His family and close relatives wept quietly in the dock as those verdicts were returned. The killers showed no remorse. They were impassive in the dock. In fact, Michael Adebolajo, a father of 6, looked straight at me and smiled before kissing the Quran as he was sent down by the judge. They were hoping to achieve martyrdom for killing a soldier. Now they face life behind bars for what the prosecution described as a cowardly and callous murder. A soldier unable to defend himself, off duty and unarmed. This is one of the last images of Fusilier Lee Rigby, just seconds before the attack. Michael Adebolajo and Michael Adebowale had lain in wait, claiming Allah had commanded them to kill a soldier. The young father was the first they saw. With the Fusilier's blood on their hands and his body left in the road, Michael Adebolajo wanted people to film, as he claimed he was a soldier of Allah.
By Allah, we swear by the Almighty Allah, we will never stop fighting you until you leave us alone. We must fight them as they fight us, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth.
Lee Rigby's mother had watched this footage in horror and knew it was her son.
And I actually stood there and watched, you know, the whole thing. Tried to phone Lee, couldn't get hold of Lee. About 2 o'clock, I was just going up to bed. I put the bedroom light on and the door went, and I knew straight away. I've never felt pain like I do now. It's there constantly, it's every day.
His killers were born in Britain and had converted to Islam. Both were on the security forces' radar. Michael Adebolajo had already been deported back to the UK from Kenya because of his radical views.
I don't think anybody realised how radicalised certain ones in this country have become. I mean, there's a difference between spouting on the telly their views and going to this level, which has never happened before.
Lee Rigby's fateful journey began here on the 22nd of May as he finished his shift at the Tower of London doing a job he loved. It was just before 2 p.m. and the young Fusilier started walking to the train station to cross London to get back to his temporary base in the capital. He left the train station at Woolwich Arsenal at 2:10 and started the short walk to his barracks. At the same time, Michael Adebolajo and Michael Adebowale were in their car circling the barracks, looking for a soldier to attack. As Lee Rigby crossed Artillery Place, they saw him, their target, and drove straight at him. Lee Rigby was hit from behind with such force he was thrown across the road. Michael Adebolajo said he was still conscious after being struck, adding to his family's pain. As Lee Rigby lay helpless, his killers dragged his body into the road, wanting people to watch as they stabbed and tried to decapitate him. They were seen smirking, posing, proud of what they'd done. And even though they stayed here armed with knives, a machete and a gun, one woman knelt down next to the soldier's body to give him some comfort, a remarkable act of humanity. Vicky Cave saw his body in the street and ran to give him first aid, but it was too late.
He was just lying lifeless on the floor, and it was that lady, so brave, so brave, just absolutely amazing, just rubbing his back and just saying, "I'm a mum," and if that was my son, I'd want someone to be there. She was incredible.
The killers waited for the police, expecting to be shot themselves, in their words, to achieve a higher position in paradise. One firearms officer described how she thought she was going to die as they ran towards her. Lee Rigby's family have shown immense dignity and restraint in court, often forced to leave in tears, as Michael Adebolajo constantly referred to them by name, telling police he'd only answer their questions to ease their pain.
Between us, we decided that the soldier is the most fair target. It just so happened that he was the soldier that was spotted first.
Lynn Rigby said Lee had wanted to be a soldier from as young as 4.
It was always, you know, the army was #1, and yeah, he followed his dream.
His family thought he was safe on British soil, his son too young to understand. "My daddy, my hero," the words printed on his T-shirt, echoing the thoughts of everyone at his funeral. One day they'll have to tell Jack what happened to his dad, killed by strangers and their warped view of Islam. Well, Lee Rigby's family have been here for every day of this 3-week trial. The judge has praised their great dignity and fortitude sitting through the often harrowing evidence. Now, he did warn them he won't be sentencing the soldier's killer until some point in January, waiting for a court appeal ruling on whole life sentences. Now, just minutes after the verdicts were read out, his fiancée and his widow and his parents came out still very upset and gave their reaction, which was read by a police officer.
This has been the toughest times of our lives. No one should have to go through what we've been through as a family. We are satisfied that justice has been done, but unfortunately no amount of justice will bring Lee back. These people have taken him away from us forever, but his memory lives on in all of us, and we will never forget him. We are very proud of Lee, who served his country, and we will now focus on building a future for his son Jack, making him as proud of Lee as we all are.
Well, there are warnings tonight. It's becoming more and more difficult for the security services to identify and stop extremists like the men who killed Lee Rigby.
But Muslim communities in our region say they're doing all they can to prevent young people becoming radicalised. And as our correspondent Ashley Derricott found, Muslims in the northwest say the murder of Lee Rigby was definitely not a question of religion.
We are really scared in a way that people out there still, we've got this mentality.
I don't like this. We don't like this. I feel pain.
It's not something that we've agreed to without permission, and it shouldn't have happened.
What 2 guys have done in London don't represent 1.2 billion Muslims around the world. Islam's a religion of peace, and that's what we're out for.
As the Muslim community reacted to the killing of a British soldier in Woolwich, it was clear the shockwaves from Lee Rigby's murder were being felt much closer to home. Including here, on the edge of the Pennines, close to where he grew up. Rochdale was once synonymous with industry and cotton mills. It's a place that has since been through dramatic social change. At one of the town's mosques, boys follow centuries-old ritual. They recite the Quran, or Holy Book, in Arabic from as young as 8. But these after-school classes also adopt a more modern approach.
It's a war between Islam and militaries that invade Muslim lands.
Lessons are taught in English. The topics are current and discussions encouraged between male and female students.
I'm a person who likes to express his view a lot, and we in this mosque I can't really do it, and he's a really good teacher, and he teaches the stuff which I really want to learn and go more into depth about.
The Imam believes this is the best way these young Muslims can be prepared for life in Britain.
For me, more Islam and pure Islam is the antidote to extremism. Islam isn't the problem, it's the way that people have understood it.
Engagement amongst Muslims here in Rochdale is widely regarded as good. The town does have its problems, but not with extremist ideology. There the concern lies in other communities, where beliefs like those of the Woolwich killers have taken hold.
Without the documentation, without the collaboration.
In 2011, Munir Faruqi received 4 life sentences for preaching terror on the streets of Manchester. He was filmed by undercover officers, apparently trying to recruit foreign fighters.
Jihad is not just to go and give your life away, no. If we're going to go there, we'll make sure we take at least 40, 50 people with us.
It's the kind of rhetoric that would have appealed to Michael Adebayo and Michael Adebowale. Yet despite having prior warning, the security services were unable to stop Lee Rigby's killers becoming radicalised. And that, according to this counter-terrorism expert, marks the emergence of a new form of threat.
There's still a degree of planning, but it's not intricate planning. They're simple weapons, easy to conceal, and it's easy to carry out, and you only need 2 or 3 individuals working together, a small cell doing this, and would be very difficult to pick up and try and prevent these type of attacks. So I think, yes, they are here to stay.
We asked a group of young Muslim men to help explore the reasons for domestic extremism. The perceived failure of the UK's involvement in Iraq was seen as the most probable cause.
The fact is most of this country wasn't for war, and the Stop the War coalition that marched in London, one of the biggest street demonstrations we saw in this country, demonstrated that fact.
For me, the pivotal point is to get young people involved in the community and politically active. If they have an issue with foreign policy, then give the young people a platform to which they can, to talk about it.
But our panel rejected the idea that the convicted killers had any mainstream support.
The specific attack of Woolwich has no link to Islam, no link to British Muslims, and no link to even Britishness, to the extent that or any link to humanity. I would go to that extent as well. It was a heinous crime committed by criminals, and we see through history only criminals commit crimes as such.
It's clear the events in Woolwich laid down a challenge for everyone, not only those who believe their faith was betrayed by the perpetrators.
Our correspondent Ashley Derricott reporting there now. Joining us in the studio is Mohammed Shafiq, who is the Chief Executive of the Ramadan Foundation. One of the killers kissed the Quran today as they were sent down. You must find this so frustrating and disturbing in many ways.
Well, it's abhorrent that we saw what they did. Firstly with Lee Rigby, and can I just say the dignity shown by the Lee Rigby family has been absolutely inspiring. The way they've dealt with this sends an example to all of us that the terrorists want to divide us. They want to pull communities apart, and we must refocus and come together as communities. And I think that's very, very important. Islam is very clear. I think in the piece you, Ashley, put together there, that Islam forbids terrorism. There's nothing in that Quran that he was kissing today says that you can go around killing innocent people. There's nothing whatsoever. And he has an evil mind, an evil ideology that's got to be confronted and eradicated from this country.
I mean, it was said that Islam wasn't on trial during this case, but it must have felt at some point that it was.
Well, we feel Islam is unfairly been on trial since September the 11th. We've seen unnecessary tension being focused towards Muslims. Muslims have been held responsible for the actions of a very small minority. There are 3 million Muslims in this country, of which a handful are involved in terrorism. So, yes, we've got a responsibility to tackle this issue. Yes, we've got to engage it. But let's not tarnish all Muslims. And I think it's very, very important that one of the issues I've heard time and time again, whatever you think about foreign policy, is it comes up again and again and again. And I think in that report, one of the contributors was saying we've got to give young people a voice, and they've got to become active in politics. And if our politicians are not prepared to talk about foreign policy, the issue which these young people are talking about, then where do those young people go?
Have you met people who are so radicalised that they worry you?
Yes, I've been involved in this work for over 5 years now, and when we first started, just after just after the July the 7th attacks, we saw more and more people who were galvanised by the illegal war in Iraq and said they want to get active. And yes, some of them were expressing views which we considered to be heading towards terrorism. But thankfully, we were able to stop them by taking them to young Muslim scholars who told them what the reality is about Islam.
Do you think that is the way to tackle the radicalisation? The Prime Minister's talking about it needing to be stamped out, and that's probably what everybody would want. But how? Well,
I've told the Prime Minister on several occasions, you've got to do it in 3 different ways. One, you've got to confront the threat of far-right extremism. We've seen neo-Nazism, we've seen the EDL that have been attacking mosques across this country with 1 person being killed. And then there's got to be a listening exercise. We can't have a situation where ministers tell Muslims what to think, how to practice their faith. They've got to be prepared to listen to some of the issues, and some of them will be tough issues around foreign policy, around integration, but they've got to be addressed.
Mohammed Shafiq, there we have to leave it. Thanks for joining us this evening.
Thank you.
Well, moving on now, there is no question of how proud Lee Rigby was to serve as a Fusilier, and the backdrop to his death was the fight for survival by his regiment. The 2nd Battalion Royal Regiment of Fusiliers, which recruits heavily from the northwest, faces the axe under the latest round of cuts by the Ministry of Defence.
But critics argue that would be a mistake. Daniel Hewitt reports now on the story of Lee Rigby's regiment and its defiant motto, once a Fusilier, always a Fusilier.
Once a Fusilier, always a Fusilier. Lee, it was a family to him.
Once a Fusilier, always a Fusilier. We'll never forget us. We'll always remember you.
Once a Fusilier, always a Fusilier. From the day you join the regiment, you are a Fusilier and always will be.
From the day he joined the army as a teenager, Lee Rigby wanted to be a Fusilier. He was one of hundreds of thousands of men who, for nearly 350 years, left his home in the northwest to fight as a Fusilier across the world. From the Napoleonic Wars and Crimea to the Battle of the Somme and Afghanistan, a bond has been forged in this regiment from battles spanning centuries. But their latest battle is with the British government.
You need to be looking at defence. This is denial, not defence.
At September's Conservative Party conference, 2 retired Fusiliers interrupted a speech by the Defence Secretary Philip Hammond, a speech in which he announced the end of the 2nd Battalion of Fusiliers by 2020. Joe Eastwood, who protested that day, is now leading the campaign against the government. Like Lee Rigby, he too left his home in the northwest as a teenager to join the Fusiliers.
It's not a difficult concept to imagine. A group of men come together, train together from the same area, and they develop a bond. And that bond is very, very powerful. They've got their heart in this regiment. It's not just a job, it's not even a vocation, it's a way of life. And it also involves their families. The families are part of the regimental family. And so you're looking at nothing that's really comparable in industry or anywhere else. It's a very unique relationship.
It's a relationship which links generations of Fusiliers. In Bury, those who no longer serve lead the fight for those that still do. At their base in Decalia in Cyprus, army life goes on for the 2nd Battalion. These men fought alongside Lee Rigby in Afghanistan. On the walls of their barracks sits his picture, beside colleagues who made the ultimate sacrifice. If Lee were here with them, he too would be fearing for his future. As serving soldiers, they're forbidden from protesting, but they know that there are plenty of others willing to do that for them.
Left, left, right, left.
What makes the Fusiliers really unique is a real sense of family, and that's nowhere more true than in Bury and in Lancashire, where Lee came from, in Middleton. And the funeral service taking place in Bury Parish Church really brought it home to everybody that was the spiritual home of the Lancashire Fusiliers, and therefore the spiritual home of the Royal Regiment of Fusiliers in the northwest.
For many Fusiliers, Decalia is their first overseas deployment. Lee Rigby was no different. For over a year, this was his second home. It was here where he showed himself to be a talented musician, an excellent machine gunner and a respected colleague. His friends remember him for many things, but it was being a drummer and a fusilier that they say he was most proud of.
It was everything to him. Being a fusilier and in the corps of drums was everything to him. He loved it.
It filled him with pride to be part of the regiment, and he was also very proud to be part of the drums platoon. Perfect fusilier.
At the Rigby family home in Middleton, the mantelpiece pays testament to that. Since Lee's death, his father Ian has joined the fight to keep his son's regiment alive.
Fusiliers is incredibly supported, and to take away the heart of a regiment, it takes away history and it hurts a lot of families.
It's the guys that have been in, you know, the Fusiliers, the junior NCOs, the guys who have been in 3 and 5 years who've got a future in the army. They've had the rug pulled from underneath them. It's important that people understand how unique that bond is amongst the battalion. It's family.
This is our life, you know what I mean? We come out here, we're all one big family. It's just a shame Rig isn't here.
Well, next, and from the fight for survival by Lee Rigby's regiment to a group of people fighting their very own personal battle, facing the rest of their lives without their best friend.
Now, we've already heard about the terrible distress for his family, but the pain is also felt very deeply further afield by his colleagues in the army and in his hometown of Middleton, where his childhood friends are having to come to terms with losing Lee from their lives, someone they'd known from boy to man.
He was the life and soul of the party, really. I don't think anyone ever had a bad word against him. Everyone loved him. He's one of a kind, really.
Very much a practical joker. Probably one of the biggest practical jokers I've met.
You could always look to Lee and he'd be doing something silly, something stupid, but it would just make you laugh.
It's a face now synonymous with terror. But to those who knew Lee, he was a father, son, friend and brother.
He'd always cheer you up if you were down. He'd wind you up as well. But then within that second, he could just say something that'd make you laugh. You couldn't be mad with him.
Lee Rigby was the oldest of 6 children. He grew up on the sprawling Langley estate in Middleton.
It was here that Lee lived until he joined the army. He went to the local primary, Langley County, and then on to Middleton Technology School. But it was on these streets that he formed some of his strongest friendships.
I can remember his fingers doing that though. I can actually remember now.
We were friends from the off, all 4 of us. We grew up in a deprived area, really. There wasn't much to do, so we used to just hang about together, really.
He had 2 big passions, Manchester United and a certain Irish boy band.
Lee's music sense was different. That's all I can say about that. I mean, he loved his Westlife. I mean, I used to think he was taking the mick at first, but, you know, I think we all quickly found out that he was pretty serious about the Westlife thing.
But there was only one thing he really wanted, and that was to join the army.
From day one, that's all he wanted to do. He didn't want to do anything else. He didn't want to do any other jobs. It was always the army. He just wanted to make his family proud. He wanted to serve the country.
He always knew he was going to make people proud, you know, and that's exactly what he did.
He joined the Lancashire Fusiliers as a teenager and was posted to Cyprus just 12 weeks after finishing his training. In 2009, he was deployed to Afghanistan. It was one of the most violent periods in the conflict.
There was a lot of close calls, things like that, and, you know, no doubt Lee would have been right amongst it. With you know, looking out for his mates next to him.
Out of all the crew, he would have been the best to cope. He could just lighten the moment up. You know, that's what he was like. He was. His characteristic was unbelievable, honestly. He was brilliant.
He was a machine gunner and pretty good at it too, even winning a Top Gun award. But he was soon selected for the Corps of Drums.
He was always wanting to be leading from the front. He was very good at what he'd done. It was perfect for him to be at the front leading the battalion, whether that was through machine guns or drums.
After Afghanistan, he returned to the UK in a new post as an army recruiter. It involved ceremonial duties at the Tower of London and his favourite job here at Windsor Castle.
Joy to work with. Even when it was like pretty rubbish, do you know what I mean? You think, oh,
don't want to do this. He was like, oh, come on, lads. Have a smile on his face. I was like, oh, he's at it again. He make you laugh, and then you feel better, and then wherever you went, people loved him. Like, he got on well with everyone. So, for example, we went to a school, the kids would be like, oh, Lee. He was a charismatic sort of geezer.
Lee married in 2007 and had a 2-year-old son, Jack, but he since separated from his wife and was engaged to Amy, who he'd met in the army.
Turn him round.
This video of them with Amy's brother, taken shortly before Lee died.
I couldn't believe it. It was just, words don't describe really. You just don't believe it.
I'd heard it on the radio, never in your worst nightmares could you think it's someone that close to you. Just felt sick.
Just a massive shock. Massive shock. Didn't expect it.
I'd like him to be remembered as the hero he was, but also the genuine, nice person, the down-to-earth, one of the lads, the good father he was, and a good friend, really good friend.
I feel proud and privileged to have grew up with Lee.
We'll never forget. He'll never be forgotten.
Some lovely memories of Lee Rigby there in that report from Mel Barham. Well, we're going back to the Old Bailey now. Elaine, as we've heard, this has been a terrible ordeal for the Rigby family, more so with Christmas nearly here. Their first, of course, without Lee.
Yes, indeed, Lucy. They have shown immense dignity and restraint throughout this trial, but the strain was starting to show in the last few days. Now, one of Lee's uncles, Raymond Dutton, told us it had become almost unbearable for them at times during this trial, made worse because it's so close to Christmas.
Christmas for the young uns and the family, I think they're going to find it really hard that Big Brother's not there. Etched in your memory is what we saw on the TV coverage on the day, and balancing that out are all your good memories, the wedding, the birth of his son. And sadly, little Jack will have no father this Christmas. So some good times, very mixed, but there's some bad ones as well we've got to get rid of.
Well, his family say only now can they start the grieving process. Now, the soldiers' killers had hoped to divide communities, but in fact the Prime Minister says they brought those communities together. And his parents say they've been heartened by the tremendous support that they've had, not only in his hometown of Middleton, but right across the country.
Thank you. There is more coverage of the trial on our website, itv.com/Granada, and that's all from Granada Reports for tonight. On the day, 2 men were found guilty of the murder of Lee Rigby.
Good night.